Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Tim Scott, the presidential candidate, for we knew him not at all, and didn't care about him either, he's dropping out of the presidential race, and I gotta tell you, I'm shocked. I can't believe it. I don't get it. He was doing so well. I thought for sure he was gonna go all the way, just like all those other black Republican candidates. Anyone remember how Colin Powell had the full support of the GOP back in the early 90s? Me neither. Or maybe Alan Keyes' doomed to fail campaign. Or Herman Cain, who was taken down by other Republicans, by the way. Or Larry Elder's presidential dreams. Yeah, the GOP's colorblind, aren't they? These Negroes just keep on trying and failing. They tell themselves that if they attack the black community viciously enough, why, that's going to get all of those low-key racists on the right to flock to them and they can just ride that horse to glory. These chumps never want to accept that for the rank-and-file GOP voter, they can't even stand looking at them to begin with. And the GOP leadership definitely doesn't want to take orders from a black person, no matter how much of a suck-up they've been. Tim Scott has lived his entire life in denial, and whether it's genuine denial or him just pretending so that he can keep climbing the ladder is beside the point. He simply doesn't want to accept that he's the GOP's pet Negro, the white right's official black friend, and they can't stand having more than one. This is not to say that the Democrats are any better, but we frequently get allegedly black Republicans, though in many cases they're non-black posters hoping we'll be gullible enough to support the GOP. And these clowns will come bombing into the comments section or on the Twitter feeds, saying, "You're right, the Democrats ain't done nothing for black folks in 50 years. That's why you need to vote for the Republicans." Now, the Republicans have been around since at least the Civil War. And what have they done for black people in 150 years? Yeah, we're calling out the fact that the Democrats have done nothing for black people, and the Republicans have the nerve to act surprised when we tell them to kick rocks because they haven't produced anything for us either. The GOP has had control of both houses of Congress numerous times in the last 40 years alone. And this control of Congress has often coincided with them controlling the White House too. So with Republicans in control of both the executive and legislative branches of government, all these times when they could have done something for black people, what has the GOP done? Just like the Democrats, they choose a hot-button issue, one having nothing to do with benefiting us, and then they try to see how far that will get them. There's no criticism that we can give about the Democrats that doesn't also go for the Republicans. I say that for all of the lurkers and losers in the comments section who are thinking to themselves that they're going to be able to find some gullible Negroes here. No, we're not lowering the standards for the Republicans any more than we would for the Democrats. Now, Tim Scott's out here saying that people were speculating that he was gay because they didn't want to admit that they didn't want to support him because he's black. I'm not entirely sure what he's talking about, though it is amusing to hear that from him. And so the thwarted bootlick does what they always do when they've been humiliated. Whether it was Clarence Thomas at his confirmation hearing or Omarosa, when they wind up getting kicked around, they'll immediately remember that racism is a real thing, at least for this news cycle. And then they'll invoke it as if nobody remembers, hey, these were the guys for the last 20 years saying that racism didn't exist. Suddenly it's okay to claim that race can hold you back, huh, Tim Scott? And to think he had to bow out right after he revealed to the whole world that he has a girlfriend now. White, of course. Well, I hope he didn't have to pay her too much. Allegedly, he's been dating her for about a year, or so the gossip goes. So why unveil her now? Why did he wait until this moment? Perhaps he thought that he would make a last-minute appeal to the traditional conservative types. Did he think a significant other was all that was keeping him from getting the nomination? There's only been one bachelor president that I can think of, and that was over 100 years ago. Tim Scott wasn't going to be number 2. He has neither the respect nor even the contempt of the GOP base. The problem isn't that they hate him. The problem is they don't care about him at all. He's invisible. He doesn't exist to them. And bringing out his blonde girlfriend isn't going to change their minds because they were never going to vote for him in the first place. I wonder, did pulling this move make him feel more manly? At least now none of his detractors can say he's never been seen in the presence of a woman because he's had a couple of photo ops with her. And just to show that these bootlicks are all operating out of the same playbook and that they all have the same mentality, what's going on with Tim Scott, of course, reminds us all of Cory Booker. He was supposed to be dating Rosario Dawson, remember? People speculated that he was gay for a long while, so that PR stunt gave both him and Rosario some headlines that were beneficial. And it was no surprise at all to anyone when he washed his hands of her. Absolutely nobody was asking, will they or won't they? 'Cause a power couple, they were not. They were just grist for the mill, something for the news cycle. And Rosario didn't seem to mind Cory Booker distancing himself from her so suddenly, because after all, it wasn't real. As I've always told you, these people don't have marriages or relationships. They have arrangements. And while people were skeptical about Booker's sudden bout of heterosexuality, Rosario kind of threw some cold water on the proceedings when she announced that she was coming out. But she wouldn't say whether she was coming out as a lesbian, bisexual, or whatever. Finally, she said she was coming out as an ally of the LGBT community. Not that she was coming out as gay, but she's stepping forward to stick up for the LGBT community. Weird on top of weird. Tim Scott is the most confused kind of bootlick. When the Black Lives Matter protests were at their height, he was so desperate to try to find a way to get himself in front of the cameras and carry water for the white right, but the best that he could think of was to say on the floor of the Senate that he had been racially profiled by police and pulled over, so he knows what it means to be black. I guess he thought that he was skillfully co-opting the issue, but all people heard was the main black flunky and apologist for anti-black racism in Congress, who was now trying to act like a victim. You know, Brother Tariq talked a while back about how the name Leroy came to be common in the black community. On some plantations, particularly the ones owned by French slave masters, they would occasionally hold parties at the big house. And sometimes they would take one of the slaves, usually an old one, and as a joke, they would crown him king for the night. The French word for king is roi, and when you call someone the king in French, you say Leroy. And that was how so many black men wound up with the name Leroy, a holdover from a degrading plantation ritual. Well, Tim Scott is the political Leroy of the Republicans. They're laughing at him. They don't mind necessarily having him as a senator. He's a useful idiot they can hide behind and claim that they're not racist because they voted for the guy who constantly says racism doesn't exist. And even if it does, it's not that bad. Of course, Scott is the only black person these allegedly colorblind right-wingers have ever or would ever vote for. He's their puppet. He has no power, just like the slaves the plantation owners would ridicule by calling them king for the sake of a few sick laughs. Tim Scott actually thought that making him senator meant that they liked him. They've just been laughing at him. They know this brainless suck-up isn't going to do anything they don't approve of, so there's no harm in making him senator. White supremacy believes in sizing up those it oppresses, because every system of oppression relies on a certain number of the oppressed to be complicit in their own mistreatment. The white supremacists understand that they cannot put power in the wrong black person's hands, so they make sure that any sports contract or political high office holder that they have, they make sure it's somebody who's going to simply obey. And dangerous Negroes like you and me, they do whatever they can to keep as far away from us as possible, make sure that we don't get two nickels to rub together. Because if you give us a $40 million check, we won't blow it all on white women and jewelry. I would love to say that this will be the humiliating end of Tim Scott, but it's not. Let's be honest. There's nothing he can do more humiliating than how he's already bowed and scraped for that little old Senate seat he's got. He willingly swallowed his own dignity for so long, there's none left. At this point, I'm half expecting him to turn up on Dancing with the Stars or some other reality game show. He doesn't have very far to fall. He's reached the end of the line, at least as far as climbing the ladder goes. And it's hard to feel bad for him because we all know he didn't really expect this to help him get to higher office. Of course he bowed out of the race. He was never in it to begin with. Sure, he had some tech bro financial donors. A lot of people in Congress do, but so what? These billionaires and mega millionaires give money to a number of candidates every election cycle. Numerous candidates in the same race. Not just one. Sure, they may have a favorite, but they know it doesn't pay to become too attached to anyone. So whatever few votes and donors Tim Scott had told himself he was going to have, they've already begun to shift to Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy, or some of the less intelligent will try to glom onto DeSantis' sinking ship, that is if they just don't know any better. And there's a few who no doubt will just embrace the horror and throw their support behind Trump. One thing's for sure, this is the end of the line for Tim Scott's presidential dreams. We can laugh at how silly it was for him to pretend that he could get the party of open racism to ever support him. But the real joke would have been if by some unholy miracle Tim Scott had actually managed to get the presidency. We can all guess exactly how that disaster would go. He would constantly be asking Mitch McConnell what he should do, and then asking Lindsey Graham for permission to do it. See, that's what the Tim Scotts and all of these other little junior bootlicks never want to accept. The main reason that they're simply not going to be able to get all of this support from the white right is because they understand exactly what these guys are. They're suck-ups. They're servants. And instead of going to the butler to see if he can do anything, those Republican voters just bypassed him altogether and went straight to the Lord of the Manor because that's who he takes orders from anyway. At least now Tim Scott can get back to what he really enjoys doing, running interference for the white right and telling everybody that racism doesn't exist. Go back to crawling on his belly. Well, at least that's something he can actually do. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Alan Reese, Latrice Wilson, Glenda Tice, Michael Gilmore, and R. Laz. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.